In today's episode or video, I would like to tell you about social language. It's something that is not familiar to a lot of people, but when I describe it, you'll think, oh yeah, that's it. And this social language is how children learn to use a certain kind of language for a certain situation. So I'd like to make a proposal to you. Sit down one day and write out the kind of situations that you participate in every day. Getting up situation, mealtime situation, driving to work with people, riding in an elevator, making decisions at work, gathering your family around you and having a little family meeting, and so on. And take a look at the words you use in each situation and see whether or not these words are actually the very best ones. Now, it should become obvious to you that the most successful people are the ones who learn a type of language that is really successful for a specific circumstance, so that you can show yourself and other people that you know how to participate well. So, for example, if men learn about work and all the stuff having to do with performance, and women want to learn, and they learn about relational language, then when a wife comes and says, I want to talk to you, she'll talk for a few minutes, and then he'll say, well, why don't you do this, or why don't you do that? She doesn't want to hear any of that. She wants somebody to say, oh, well, tell me about this, and she wants to be understood. So one of the most common conflicts in a marriage or in a heterosexual relationship is where we foul up, communicate to solve with communicate to understand. So then we need to learn about the word context. And it's not a common word in people's vocabulary, but it should be in light of how important it is, because then we would understand every circumstance in terms of the language that's the most successful in it. So this language is appropriate for myself, and language having to do with other people and the task or the circumstance that is going on. So what is the very best thing to do if a coach is telling you, for example, how to play the game better? Is it say, oh no, you can't tell me that, I don't want to listen to that? Well, he'll just bench you as not coachable. On the other hand, if you say, okay, good, I'll go do that. And you might teach your children social language like just saying, well, I'm sorry, or you're probably right. And that solves a lot of conflict between friends. And it doesn't mean that your children are disadvantaged in any way. So here's how it happens. In language development, kids go through all the sounds and getting the sounds right in the mouth right to make them, and then a few words, and we keep working, and somewhere between 2 and 4 or 5, they go through something called fast mapping. And this fast mapping is an accumulation of words that are formed into sentence. And during that period of time, they start applying it to people, and they start applying it to different situations. So they know how to talk when they're at church, when they're at school, when they're in family, when they're with close friends, and so on. Now, it's also during this period of time that young children may say more to other people about your private life than you'd like them to. So you want to be really careful, because they often cannot tell the difference between those situations. Then I want to address something called pragmatics. And pragmatics is what works. What's the best language to use for this situation? So in school performance, for example, you can enhance children's performance in school by asking your child to make eye-to-eye contact with the teacher, and occasionally go, oh yeah, and then write notes when the teacher's talking, or ask a question, or answer a question. And the fact that a child will use that language in school is very meaningful to school teachers. Teachers evaluate children who use that language as bright or interestingly, and also they perceive them to be harder workers. So there's a pragmatic form of language for every circumstance if you took the time to figure it out. Then I want to present something called code switching, which means that we change the situation from circumstance to circumstance. So imagine that you're laughing and talking with your children and you're on your way somewhere and you stop and everybody gets out. You go into a public setting. Well, the language and the emotions and the tones of language will change. It's pragmatic to become quiet and more respectful in, say, a restaurant or some other place. Then what about language adaptations? Language adaptations is very interesting because there's some sort of foundational work done by somebody called Benjamin Whorf. And he proposed that language develops according to the circumstances in which we grow up. For example, Eskimo language has over 50 words having to do with snow and ice, where in the continental United States we might have 4 or 5. Well, that makes sense. Eskimos are around a lot of snow and ice, and so on. And so in America, for example, if you ask the question, what is the topic that has the largest vocabulary attached to it, most people would not know, but it's cars. Cars, people work in the automobile business. 1 out of 7 people are associated with cars. Now, let me also propose to you that Whorf created this hypothesis, which is not fully scientifically proven, but it's a wonderful idea. And it is the idea that if you don't know the word, you may not see that situation. So if somebody doesn't get a situation right, instead of blaming them, say, listen, did you see that person's feelings? Did you watch that person's gestures? Did you see what he was doing or she was doing, and so on? And you can improve your children's ability to succeed socially by making sure they know the words for a given circumstance. Then lastly, I would like to describe something called perceptual frames. The human brain stores language based on a person's experience. And the more experience you have, the richer are these perceptual frames, and the more likely you are to choose that. So for example, a hunter who hunts a lot will know a lot of details about hunting, about animals, and about guns and so on. A person who doesn't do that will have a different perceptual frame. And so these perceptual frames are created for miserable experiences, traumatic experiences, happy and successful ones. So when you are presenting experiences to your children, make sure that they create a perceptual frame of successful understanding of people, making people and the other people priorities, making sure that there are positive emotions, and they teach them a vocabulary of positive emotional words and teach them to use them so that they put this into their language and enable them to understand people and themselves. Social language turns out to be a significant kind of development for children, especially when you want your children to be successful in any endeavor.